Welcome to Sleepy Life Eras. Tonight, we are spending a quiet night inside a medieval tavern after closing time. The day has ended. The doors are closed. The fire has settled into a low, steady glow. Nothing here needs your attention. Everything moves slowly. You are safe to rest. You are safe to listen. The evening has already ended. The tavern is quiet now. The doors have been closed for some time. The sounds of the day have faded away. Wooden benches are pushed in beneath the tables. The tables are clean and bare. No hands move across their surfaces. Empty mugs are stacked neatly along the wall. Their rims catch a faint trace of firelight. The hearth holds only a low, steady glow. The fire no longer crackles or shifts. Ash settles quietly within the stone surround. Warmth lingers without effort. Most of the room rests in shadow. The shadows remain soft and unmoving. Thick wooden beams stretch overhead. They disappear into darkness above the room. The floorboards lie still beneath the tables. No footsteps pass across them now. A ladder rises toward an upper loft. It stands unused and quiet. Nothing stirs above or below. A small door at the back remains closed. Its surface shows the wear of many years. The latch does not move. Shutters are drawn tight against the night. No light enters from outside. The night remains beyond the walls. Air rests calmly in the room. No voices linger in the space. No tasks remain unfinished. The day's work has already passed. The room holds only stillness. Time slows without resistance here. Nothing waits to begin again. The tavern remains exactly as it is. The quiet does not ask for attention. The space offers no demands. Everything has come to rest. The room remains unchanged as time continues to pass. The tavern holds its shape without effort. Nothing has shifted since the doors were closed. The air stays settled and calm. Warmth from the hearth lingers gently near the floor. It no longer rises or falls. The glow remains low and even. Light rests softly against the stone. Shadows stay where they are. They do not stretch or retreat. The wooden beams overhead remain quiet and distant. Their outlines soften as the light dims. Nothing overhead draws the eye. The space feels complete. The tables remain bare and still. Their surfaces reflect only a faint warmth. No marks appear where hands once rested. The benches stay tucked in close. They no longer invite movement. The stacked mugs remain untouched. Their shapes repeat quietly along the wall. No sound comes from them now. The hearth no longer asks for attention. Its embers sit quietly within the stone. Ash rests where it has fallen. Nothing stirs it. The floorboards remain cool and unmoving. They carry no weight now. The center of the room feels open and settled. The corners hold steady darkness. Light and shadow remain balanced. The ladder to the loft stands as it was. Its rungs fade gently into the dim above. Nothing travels upward or down. The loft remains unseen and quiet. The back door stays closed. Its outline is familiar and unchanging. The latch holds without effort. The shutters keep the night outside. Darkness rests beyond the walls. Inside, the air feels contained and calm. No draft passes through the room. The stillness remains uninterrupted. Time moves gently here. Moments pass without notice. Nothing signals their passing. The room does not measure time. It simply remains. The warmth continues to soften the space. It does not increase or fade quickly. It holds steady. The tavern feels settled into the night. No work remains undone. No voices are expected to return. The room has completed its purpose for the day. Stillness fills the space evenly. Nothing calls for action. Nothing waits to begin. The quiet remains neutral and complete. The walls hold the calm within them. The ceiling keeps its distance above. The floor supports the silence below. The tavern stays exactly as it is. No change is required. No attention is needed. The space remains safe and finished. Time continues without urgency. The night deepens outside without entering. Inside, nothing shifts in response. The glow remains low and steady. The shadows remain soft and still. The room holds its quiet patiently. There is no expectation placed on the moment. The tavern does not change its posture. It remains settled into rest. The stillness continues without effort. Nothing disturbs the balance of the room. The calm extends evenly through the space. Everything remains complete. The tavern remains quiet as the night continues to settle around it. Nothing has shifted within the room since the doors were closed earlier in the evening. The space holds its shape without effort or movement. The wooden walls remain still in the low, steady light. The doors stay firmly closed, unchanged and unmoving. No sound reaches them from either side. Warmth from the hearth remains close to the stone floor. It lingers gently without rising or spreading further. The glow stays low and even within the hearth. It does not flicker or brighten. Light rests quietly against the rough stone surround. The stone absorbs the warmth without reflection. Shadows remain gathered along the edges of the room. They stay soft and unmoving. The balance between light and shadow does not change. The wooden beams overhead remain quiet and distant. Their dark outlines soften slightly in the dim light below. Nothing overhead draws attention downward. The ceiling remains high and out of focus. The tavern feels finished and complete. The tables remain bare and still across the room. Their surfaces hold only a faint trace of warmth. No marks remain where hands once rested. The benches stay pushed in beneath the tables. They sit close and quiet, untouched. Nothing invites movement or use. The stacked mugs remain lined neatly along the wall. Their rounded shapes repeat without variation. They remain undisturbed. No sound comes from them now. The hearth no longer asks for attention. Its embers remain low within the stone. Ash rests exactly where it has settled. Nothing stirs it. The warmth near the hearth stays gentle and contained. It does not travel far into the room. The floorboards remain cool and still beneath the tables. They support nothing but silence. The center of the room feels open and settled. The corners remain dark and unchanged. The air rests evenly throughout the space. No draft moves through the room. The ladder to the upper loft stands quietly against the wall. Its wooden rungs fade upward into shadow. Nothing travels up or down. The loft remains unseen and still. The small door at the back of the tavern remains closed. Its surface shows years of use without movement. The latch holds quietly in place. The shutters remain drawn tight against the night. No light enters from outside. Darkness stays beyond the walls. Inside, the room remains contained and calm. The tavern does not respond to the passing of time. Moments move through the space without notice. Nothing marks their passing. The glow in the hearth remains steady and low. The shadows remain soft and unchanged. The walls continue to hold the quiet within them. The ceiling remains distant and still above. The floor remains firm and silent below. The room does not expect anything to happen. No task waits to be completed. No movement is required. The tavern remains settled into rest. The warmth near the hearth stays constant. It does not rise or fade. The air remains calm between the walls. Nothing shifts within it. The furniture remains exactly where it was left. The tables stay evenly spaced across the room. The benches remain close and aligned beneath them. The mugs remain stacked and quiet along the wall. The hearth continues to glow faintly. The shadows continue to rest along the edges of the room. The ladder remains still and unused. The back door remains closed without sound. The shutters keep the night outside. Inside, the tavern remains unchanged. Time continues without urgency or signal. The room does not measure it. It simply remains. The quiet holds steady without asking for attention. The stillness does not deepen in any noticeable way. It stays the same moment after moment. The glow remains low and the room remains calm. The edges of the light stay close to the hearth. The light does not stretch farther across the floor. The stone around the hearth remains warm and still. The ash remains settled and quiet. Nothing disturbs the surface of the hearth. Nothing shifts within the bed of embers. The room remains finished with the day. There is no sign of work beginning again. There is no sign of activity returning. The tavern remains closed and quiet. The benches remain tucked beneath the tables. The tables remain bare and simple. The mugs remain stacked neatly along the wall. The wood of the table stays dark in the low light. The grain of the wood remains soft and understated. Nothing in the room calls out with detail. Everything remains muted and calm. The room feels steady and contained. The air remains quiet and still. No sound moves through it. No change passes through the space. The ladder remains a silent shape against the wall. Its rungs remain evenly spaced and still. The loft remains unseen above. Nothing up there shifts or settles. Nothing up there calls for attention. The back door remains closed and calm. Its outline remains unchanged in the dimness. The latch remains still. The shutters remain drawn tight. No outside light finds a way inside. The darkness outside remains separate and distant. Inside, the tavern remains quiet and finished. The ceiling remains high and distant. The beams remain dark and still above. They hold the roof without movement. They hold the room without change. The floor remains firm and quiet beneath everything. The open center of the room remains empty and calm. The corners remain softly dark. The light remains gentle and low. The shadows remain soft and stable. The room remains exactly as it is. Time continues with no announcement. Minutes pass without being counted. The tavern does not keep track of them. It remains the same through each passing moment. The hearth remains low and steady. The glow remains close and contained. The warmth remains gentle and quiet. The tables remain bare and still. The benches remain tucked in and quiet. The mugs remain stacked and undisturbed. The ladder remains unused and still. The back door remains closed and calm. The shutters remain drawn against the night. The air remains still between the walls. The quiet remains complete and unbroken. The room holds a steady sense of completion. It feels as though everything has already been done. It feels as though nothing remains to be added. The space stays simple and finished. The hearth continues to provide a low, steady glow. The glow does not demand attention. It remains a gentle presence in the corner of the room. The stone around it remains warm and still. The air near it feels softly tempered. The air farther away remains cooler and quiet. No draught carries warmth through the tavern. No draught carries sound through the tavern. Everything remains settled and calm. The tables remain quiet landmarks within the space. Their edges remain still and unchanging. Their surfaces remain clean and bare. The benches remain tucked close beneath them. The benches remain aligned and quiet. Nothing pulls them out. Nothing moves them. The mugs remain stacked and orderly. Their shapes repeat in a simple rhythm along the wall. That rhythm does not change. It remains a quiet pattern in the dim light. The ladder remains still as a vertical line against the wall. The rungs remain evenly spaced. The top disappears into shadow. Nothing emerges from above. Nothing goes up toward it. The back door remains closed and silent. It stays in place like a final boundary within the room. The shutters remain drawn, keeping the night outside. The darkness beyond remains distant and contained. Inside, the tavern remains calm and complete. The light from the hearth rests quietly across the nearest stones. The stones remain textured and still. The light fades gently as it travels outward. It fades across the floor without sharp edges. It fades into shadow without contrast. The shadows remain soft and patient. They remain where they are. They do not shift. They do not move. The beams overhead remain dark and quiet. They remain above the room, holding the roof without sound. The ceiling remains distant, out of the way. The floor remains firm and still under everything. The air remains steady, without motion. The room remains settled into the night. The tavern feels like a place that has completed its work. It feels like a space that has already closed its day. It feels like a room that no longer expects motion. The tables remain quiet and empty. The benches remain tucked in and still. The mugs remain stacked and orderly. The hearth remains low and steady. The ash remains settled and still. The ladder remains unused and quiet. The loft remains unseen above. The back door remains closed and calm. The shutters remain drawn against the night. The room remains unchanged. The quiet continues without interruption. There is no new sound in the space. There is no new movement in the space. There is no new detail demanding notice. The room stays simple and soft. The light remains faint and warm. The shadow remains deep and still. The balance remains stable. The air remains calm. The floor remains quiet. The walls remain still. The ceiling remains distant. The tavern remains exactly as it is. The room offers no urgency. It offers no signal to begin. It offers no signal to end. It remains in a steady middle of stillness. The glow continues to rest within the hearth. It continues to remain low and quiet. The ash remains settled and unchanged. The stone remains warm and still. The light remains soft against the stone. The shadow remains patient along the walls. The tables remain bare and quiet. The benches remain tucked in place. The mugs remain stacked and orderly. The ladder remains unused and still. The loft remains unseen. The back door remains closed. The shutters remain drawn tight. The air remains still and quiet. The room holds a gentle sameness that does not change with time. It remains steady from one moment to the next. It remains consistent and calm. The tavern stays closed and quiet. The doors remain unmoving. The walls remain still. The floor remains quiet. The ceiling remains distant. The hearth remains low and steady. The light remains faint and warm. The shadows remain soft and still. The tables remain as they were left. The benches remain tucked beneath them. The mugs remain stacked along the wall. The ladder remains at rest against the wall. The back door remains closed. The shutters remain drawn. The air remains calm. The room remains unchanged. The room remains still as the night continues without notice. Nothing within the tavern asks for attention. The space holds its quiet easily. The shape of the room remains unchanged. Light remains low and steady within the space. It rests without effort. The glow does not shift or brighten. It remains close and contained. Shadows stay settled where they have gathered. They remain soft along the edges of the room. Nothing pulls them inward or pushes them outward. The balance between light and dark remains even. The air feels calm and unchanging. No motion passes through it. No sound disturbs it. The room feels complete and finished. Nothing waits to be done. Nothing prepares to begin again. The warmth present in the space remains gentle. It does not rise or spread further. It stays close to where it rests. The floor beneath everything remains quiet and firm. It supports the stillness without response. The center of the room remains open and calm. The edges remain softly dark. The space between objects feels settled and neutral. Nothing moves through that space. Nothing changes within it. The air remains evenly held between the walls. No draft passes through. No shift is felt. Time continues without announcement. Moments pass without being marked. The room does not register them. It remains steady from one moment to the next. The tavern holds the quiet without effort. It does not deepen or thin. It remains consistent. The light remains faint and warm. The shadows remain patient and still. The air remains calm and unchanged. The space feels gently contained. Nothing presses in from outside. Nothing pulls outward from within. The walls hold the stillness quietly. They remain unmoving and solid. The ceiling remains distant and out of focus. It stays above the room without presence. The floor remains below, firm and silent. It carries no movement. The room remains settled into the night. Nothing within the space responds to the passage of time. The quiet remains even and uninterrupted. The light does not flicker or shift. The shadow does not creep or retreat. Everything remains where it is. Nothing arrives. Nothing leaves. The space remains finished and complete. The warmth remains subtle and steady. It does not call attention to itself. It simply remains present. The air remains calm between the walls. It does not move or stir. The stillness remains balanced throughout the room. No corner feels different from another. The space remains evenly quiet. The room holds a steady sameness. That sameness does not change. It remains constant from moment to moment. The tavern continues to rest without effort. The night remains outside and distant. Inside, nothing shifts in response. The light remains low and gentle. The shadows remain soft and patient. The air remains calm and contained. The room remains exactly as it is. The quiet does not ask for attention. It does not demand focus. It simply remains present. The space feels settled and complete. Nothing within it signals a change. Nothing within it signals a beginning or an ending. The room remains in a steady middle of stillness. The light continues to rest where it is. The warmth continues to linger gently. The shadows continue to remain still. The air continues to feel calm and unmoving. The walls continue to hold the space quietly. The ceiling continues to remain distant. The floor continues to remain firm and silent. The tavern remains unchanged. Time continues without urgency or notice. The room does not track it. It does not respond to it. It remains steady as moments pass through it. The stillness remains smooth and uninterrupted. Nothing interrupts the calm. Nothing alters the balance. The space remains neutral and complete. The quiet continues without variation. The room holds its calm patiently. Everything remains as it is. The space continues to hold its quiet without effort. Nothing within the room calls for attention or response. The stillness feels evenly distributed throughout the tavern. No area feels more active than another. The light remains faint and stable. It does not brighten or dim in any noticeable way. It simply remains where it is. The shadows remain settled and patient. They stay close to the edges of the room. They do not creep or withdraw. The balance between light and shadow remains unchanged. The air feels calm and unoccupied. No movement passes through it. No sound travels across it. The room feels closed off from the passage of time. Moments continue without leaving a trace. Nothing marks their arrival or departure. The tavern does not acknowledge them. It remains steady from one moment to the next. The warmth in the space remains subtle and contained. It does not spread or retreat. It remains evenly present. The floor beneath everything feels firm and unmoving. It supports the quiet without response. The open space at the center of the room remains calm. Nothing crosses through it. Nothing interrupts it. The edges of the room remain softly dark. They do not pull focus. They remain neutral and still. The air between the walls feels evenly held. No draft disturbs it. No change passes through it. The quiet feels consistent and unbroken. It does not thin or thicken. It remains the same. The room feels finished with the night. Nothing suggests a return of activity. Nothing suggests a beginning. Nothing suggests an ending. The tavern rests in a steady middle state. The light continues to remain low and gentle. It does not demand attention. It remains a background presence. The shadows continue to remain soft and still. They do not sharpen or fade. They simply remain. The air continues to feel calm and contained. Nothing moves within it. Nothing stirs within it. The walls hold the space quietly. They do not echo or respond. They simply remain in place. The ceiling remains distant and unobtrusive. It stays above the room without presence. The floor remains below, firm and silent. It carries no movement. The room remains settled into stillness. Time continues without announcement. It passes through the space unnoticed. The tavern does not measure it. It does not respond to it. The stillness remains smooth and even. Nothing interrupts the balance. Nothing alters the calm. The space remains neutral and complete. The quiet continues without variation. The room holds its calm patiently. Everything remains as it is. The sense of sameness continues gently. It does not feel repetitive. It feels continuous. The light remains faint and warm. The shadow remains deep and soft. The air remains calm and still. The space remains contained and quiet. Nothing presses inward. Nothing pulls outward. The room feels complete in its stillness. No element within it seeks change. No element within it suggests motion. The quiet remains evenly spread. No corner feels different from another. The tavern remains closed and calm. The night remains outside and distant. Inside, nothing shifts in response. The room continues to rest without effort. The quiet continues in the same steady way. Nothing within the space signals a change. The room holds its calm without effort. The sense of stillness remains evenly spread. No area feels more present than another. The light remains low and gentle. It does not shift or draw focus. It simply remains where it is. The shadows remain soft and settled. They do not deepen or withdraw. They stay exactly as they are. The air feels calm and unoccupied. No movement passes through it. No sound travels within it. The room feels closed off from urgency. Nothing presses time forward. Nothing pulls time back. Moments continue without distinction. They pass without leaving a trace. The tavern does not respond to their passing. It remains steady from one moment to the next. The warmth within the space remains subtle. It does not gather or disperse. It stays evenly present. The floor beneath everything remains firm and quiet. It supports the stillness without response. The open space remains calm and undisturbed. Nothing crosses through it. Nothing interrupts it. The edges of the room remain softly dark. They do not draw attention. They remain neutral and still. The air between the walls feels evenly held. No draft disturbs it. No change moves through it. The quiet feels smooth and continuous. It does not rise or fall. It remains the same. The space feels finished with the night. Nothing suggests activity returning. Nothing suggests something about to begin. Nothing suggests something about to end. The room rests in a steady middle state. The light continues to remain faint. It stays gentle and backgrounded. The shadows remain patient and soft. They do not sharpen or dissolve. They simply remain present. The air continues to feel calm and contained. Nothing stirs within it. Nothing shifts within it. The walls hold the space quietly. They do not echo or respond. They remain steady and still. The ceiling remains distant and unobtrusive. It stays above without presence. The floor remains below, firm and silent. It carries no movement. The room remains settled into stillness. Time continues without announcement. It passes through unnoticed. The tavern does not mark it. It does not respond to it. The stillness remains even and unbroken. Nothing interrupts the balance. Nothing alters the calm. The space remains neutral and complete. The quiet continues without variation. The room holds its calm patiently. Everything remains as it is. The sense of sameness continues gently. It feels continuous rather than repetitive. It does not suggest progression. The light remains faint and warm. The shadow remains deep and soft. The air remains calm and unmoving. The space remains contained and quiet. Nothing presses inward. Nothing pulls outward. The room feels complete in its stillness. No element within it seeks change. No element within it suggests motion. The quiet remains evenly spread. No corner feels different from another. The tavern remains closed and calm. The night remains outside and distant. Inside, nothing shifts in response. The room continues to rest without effort. The calm remains stable and unbroken. It does not thin or thicken. It does not change shape. The space remains steady across moments. Nothing signals a transition. Nothing prepares the space for something else. The quiet simply continues. The light remains where it is. The shadow remains where it is. The air remains where it is. Everything remains where it is. The room stays balanced and complete. The tavern remains unchanged. The space remains quiet in a steady and even way. Nothing within it suggests change. The sense of stillness continues without interruption. Light remains present without drawing attention. It rests softly within the space. It does not move or shift. The brightness remains low and gentle. It feels evenly spread rather than focused. Shadow remains close and calm. It does not deepen or recede. Light and shadow remain balanced together. Neither one overtakes the other. The space between them feels smooth and quiet. Air remains calm and unoccupied. Nothing passes through it. Nothing disturbs it. The air feels evenly held throughout the space. It does not gather or thin. It remains consistent. The space feels contained without pressure. Nothing presses inward. Nothing pulls outward. The quiet feels smooth and continuous. It does not rise or fall. It does not signal progression. Moments pass without distinction. They do not separate themselves from one another. They blend together softly. The space does not register their passing. It remains steady as time moves through it. The sense of warmth remains subtle and backgrounded. It is present without being noticeable. It does not change position. The space feels gently tempered. Nothing within it seeks adjustment. The quiet remains evenly distributed. No area feels different from another. The stillness feels balanced and complete. The light continues to rest without movement. The shadow continues to rest without movement. The air continues to rest without movement. Everything feels held in place. The space remains neutral and calm. Nothing calls attention forward. Nothing pulls awareness backward. The present moment feels wide and unmarked. It does not narrow or sharpen. It remains open and soft. The quiet continues in the same gentle way. It does not change tone or texture. It remains smooth and even. The air remains calm within the space. No sound moves through it. No vibration passes through it. The space feels steady and settled. Nothing within it asks for response. Nothing within it suggests motion. Light remains faint and warm. Shadow remains deep and soft. The balance between them remains unchanged. The space between them remains quiet. Time feels less distinct here. It no longer separates itself into moments. It moves without markers. The space does not follow it. It simply remains present as it passes. The sense of stillness continues without effort. Nothing interrupts it. Nothing reshapes it. The quiet feels gently continuous. It does not feel repetitive. It feels consistent. The space feels complete as it is. Nothing needs to be added. Nothing needs to be removed. The light remains soft and backgrounded. The shadow remains soft and backgrounded. The air remains soft and backgrounded. Everything remains evenly present. The space holds its calm without effort. It does not tighten or loosen. It remains open and steady. The quiet continues without direction. It does not move toward anything. It does not move away from anything. The sense of time continues to soften. Moments feel less defined. They blend gently together. The space does not separate them. The stillness remains smooth and even. Nothing within the space signals a transition. Nothing prepares the space for something else. The quiet simply continues. The space remains balanced and calm. Everything remains as it is. The sense of space continues without interruption. Nothing within it becomes more defined. Nothing within it fades away. The quiet remains evenly present. It does not gather in any one place. It does not thin out anywhere. Light remains softly present. It rests without direction. It does not move forward or backward. Shadow remains gently balanced alongside it. Neither one overtakes the other. They remain held together without effort. The space between them feels smooth and continuous. Nothing sharpens that space. Nothing breaks it apart. Air remains calm and evenly held. It does not flow. It does not settle further. It simply remains present. The feeling of stillness stays consistent. It does not deepen or lift. It stays the same from moment to moment. Time feels less separate here. Moments do not stand apart from one another. They blend together gently. There is no clear beginning to a moment. There is no clear ending to one. The space does not measure them. It does not respond to their passing. The quiet remains smooth and even. It does not signal progress. It does not suggest waiting. Light remains faint and backgrounded. It does not call attention to itself. It simply exists within the space. Shadow remains soft and steady. It does not deepen or withdraw. It stays exactly as it is. The balance between light and shadow feels complete. Nothing tips that balance. Nothing shifts it. The space feels gently contained. Nothing presses inward. Nothing pulls outward. The quiet continues without variation. It does not change tone or texture. It remains neutral and steady. Air remains calm throughout the space. No movement passes through it. No sound travels across it. The sense of presence remains soft. It does not sharpen into focus. It does not fade away. The space feels open without being empty. It feels full without being busy. The quiet fills it evenly. Time continues to soften. It feels less directional. It feels less structured. Moments no longer feel countable. They no longer separate themselves. They merge gently together. The space does not resist this blending. It allows it without response. The stillness remains smooth and continuous. Nothing interrupts it. Nothing reshapes it. Light remains soft and distant. Shadow remains soft and distant. Air remains soft and distant. Everything feels evenly present. The quiet remains gently unbroken. It does not signal a transition. It does not prepare the space for change. The sense of now feels wide and unmarked. It does not narrow. It does not sharpen. The space remains balanced and calm. Nothing within it suggests motion. Nothing within it suggests pause. The quiet simply continues. The space remains exactly as it is. The sense of space continues without form. Nothing within it becomes distinct. Nothing within it dissolves further. The quiet remains evenly present. It does not gather or spread. It simply remains. There is no center to the space now. There are no edges asking for notice. Everything feels evenly held. The feeling of light no longer separates itself. It is present without contrast. It does not brighten or dim. It remains neutral and backgrounded. The sense of shadow no longer stands apart. It blends softly into the same field. Nothing distinguishes one from the other. The balance between them no longer feels active. It feels settled and complete. Air no longer feels like movement or stillness. It feels like presence without direction. Nothing passes through it. Nothing rests within it. The idea of space becomes soft. It no longer suggests distance. It no longer suggests closeness. It simply remains open. Time feels less separate here. Moments do not form clearly. They do not dissolve either. They remain indistinct. There is no sense of earlier or later. only continuation remains. The quiet does not deepen. It does not thin out. It remains steady and neutral. Nothing within the space responds to duration. Nothing anticipates change. Nothing recalls what came before. The sense of now feels wide and unmarked. It does not narrow into focus. It does not fade away. Presence remains without emphasis. There is no foreground. There is no background. Everything feels evenly distant. The space does not guide attention. It does not invite engagement. It remains passive and complete. The quiet feels continuous rather than repetitive. It does not suggest cycles. It does not suggest progression. The sense of warmth no longer has location. It is present without source. It does not move or settle. It simply exists within the field of space. The feeling of balance no longer shifts. It no longer feels maintained. It feels inherent. Nothing presses inward. Nothing pulls outward. There is no tension in the space. There is no release either. The sense of stillness becomes indistinct from motion. Neither one stands apart. They blend quietly together. The space does not react. It does not adjust. It does not respond. The quiet continues without reference. It does not point to anything. It does not return from anything. The sense of presence remains gentle and diffuse. It does not sharpen into awareness. It does not fade into absence. It simply remains. There is no need for change. There is no signal to remain the same. Everything feels already settled. The space holds itself without effort. It does not tighten or loosen. It does not expand or contract. It remains steady. Time no longer feels directional. It no longer feels measurable. It feels like continuity without markers. The quiet does not register duration. It simply continues. Nothing within the space distinguishes one moment from another. They blend without boundary. The space remains neutral and complete. The sense of neutrality continues without definition. Nothing within the space separates itself. Nothing within the space combines further. Everything remains evenly present. The quiet holds without texture. It does not become smoother or rougher. It remains the same. There is no direction to awareness here. It does not move forward. It does not move back. It remains without motion. The feeling of space no longer suggests distance. It also no longer suggests closeness. It remains undefined and open. The sense of presence does not gather. It does not disperse. It remains gently diffuse. Time no longer feels like passage. It no longer feels like stillness either. It exists without quality. Moments do not arrive. Moments do not leave. They do not stand apart from one another. They remain blended and indistinct. The quiet does not acknowledge sequence. It does not follow anything. It does not precede anything. The sense of balance feels inherent rather than maintained. It does not require effort. It does not require attention. Nothing within the space feels active. Nothing within the space feels inactive. Those distinctions no longer apply. The feeling of light has no contrast now. It does not stand apart from anything else. It blends into the same field of presence. The idea of shadow no longer forms clearly. It does not recede or advance. It simply remains unseparated. The space no longer organizes itself around sensation. Nothing is emphasized. Nothing is minimized. Everything feels equally distant. The quiet does not carry meaning. It does not remove meaning either. It remains neutral. The sense of warmth no longer has location or source. It does not spread. It does not withdraw. It exists without movement. The sense of air no longer suggests flow or stillness. It no longer suggests holding or release. It remains without character. The feeling of being here becomes softer. It does not sharpen into awareness. It does not fade into absence. It simply remains present. Nothing within the space invites response. Nothing within the space resists response. There is no need to engage or disengage. The quiet continues without reference point. It does not orient itself around anything. It does not move toward resolution. The sense of now remains wide and unmarked. It does not narrow into focus. It does not dissolve away. It remains open and steady. The space does not shift its posture. It does not lean forward or back. It does not expand or contract. It remains unchanged. The quiet does not signal continuation or completion. Those ideas no longer apply. Only sameness remains. The space holds this sameness without effort. It does not stabilize or destabilize. It simply is. Time no longer feels present as an element. It does not pass. It does not pause. It no longer appears at all. The quiet remains continuous and even. It does not thin or thicken. It does not change shape. It remains without variation. Nothing within the space distinguishes one state from another. There are no boundaries to cross. There are no markers to notice. The sense of presence remains gently diffused. It does not gather into awareness. It does not separate into parts. It remains whole and neutral. The space feels complete without conclusion. It does not end. It does not continue. It simply remains as it is. The quiet remains. Nothing changes within it. Nothing needs to change. The sense of space feels soft and undefined. It no longer suggests shape. It no longer suggests direction. It simply feels present. Awareness does not move toward anything. It does not move away from anything. It rests without motion. The quiet has no texture now. It is neither deep nor shallow. It remains even. There is no sense of before. There is no sense of after. Only continuity remains. The feeling of time does not form. It does not pass. It does not pause. It does not appear. The space feels open without boundary. It does not expand. It does not contract. It remains steady. Nothing within the space becomes distinct. Nothing fades away either. Everything feels evenly present. The sense of light no longer separates itself. It is present without contrast. It does not brighten or dim. It remains neutral. The sense of shadow no longer forms. It does not gather or recede. It does not differ from anything else. The space no longer organizes sensation. Nothing is foreground. Nothing is background. Everything feels equally distant. The quiet does not invite attention. It does not repel attention. It remains passive. Awareness does not settle anywhere. It does not hover. It does not drift. It remains gently present. The sense of being here feels faint. It does not sharpen into focus. It does not dissolve away. It simply remains. There is no need to notice anything. There is no need to release anything. Nothing is required. The quiet remains unchanged. It does not signal continuation. It does not signal completion. Those ideas no longer apply. The space holds itself effortlessly. It does not maintain balance. It simply exists balanced. The feeling of warmth has no location. It does not move. It does not settle. It remains without source. The sense of air no longer feels like air. It feels like absence of movement. It feels like presence without form. The quiet continues evenly. It does not vary. It does not respond. It simply continues. There is no center to return to. There is no edge to drift toward. Everything feels the same. The space remains neutral and complete. The quiet continues without change. Nothing emerges from it. Nothing returns to it. The sense of space no longer suggests presence or absence. It does not feel full. It does not feel empty. It simply remains. Awareness feels suspended without effort. It does not hold on. It does not let go. It rests without direction. There is no shape to notice. There is no texture to follow. Everything feels even and indistinct. The idea of time no longer forms. It does not move forward. It does not remain still. It does not appear at all. Moments do not separate themselves. They do not gather or fade. They do not arrive or leave. They remain unformed. The quiet does not respond to duration. It does not deepen. It does not thin. It remains the same. There is no center to settle into. There is no edge to drift toward. Everything feels equally distant. The sense of light no longer separates itself from anything else. It is present without contrast. It does not brighten or dim. It simply exists. The sense of shadow no longer forms distinctly. It does not gather or recede. It does not differ from anything else. The space does not organize sensation. Nothing is foreground. Nothing is background. Everything feels evenly distant. The quiet does not invite awareness. It does not resist awareness. It remains neutral. The sense of being here softens further. It does not sharpen into attention. It does not dissolve into absence. It simply remains faint. There is no need to follow anything. There is no need to return anywhere. Nothing is required. The quiet continues evenly. It does not vary. It does not respond. It simply continues. The sense of balance no longer feels maintained. It feels inherent. It does not shift. It does not settle further. It remains unchanged. The space feels complete without resolution. It does not move toward ending. It does not move toward continuation. Those ideas no longer apply. The quiet holds itself effortlessly. It does not tighten or loosen. It does not expand or contract. It remains steady. Awareness does not gather anywhere. It does not drift away either. It remains softly present. The sense of now feels wide and unmarked. It does not narrow. It does not dissolve. It remains open. The quiet does not signal transition. It does not signal completion. It does not signal continuation. It simply remains as it is. Nothing within the space distinguishes one state from another. There are no boundaries to cross. There are no markers to notice. The sense of presence becomes barely noticeable. It does not fade completely. It does not sharpen again. It remains faint and diffuse. The quiet continues without reference. It does not point anywhere. It does not return from anywhere. The space feels settled without condition. It does not require attention. It does not require release. It simply remains.